Hello and welcome to the Six Sales podcast. My name's Mike Nicholson from Six Sales. Today I'm going to be speaking to Shazia from Lumen Research. And talking of Lumen Research, can I please say a big thank you to the team over at Lumen for sponsoring the Six Sales podcast. For those that don't know, Lumen Research are an eye tracking technology company that help brands to plan, buy, measure and optimize media and creative investments towards real human attention. So thanks to the team at Lumen. And welcome, Shazia. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Very well. Welcome back, actually. We're just talking off air there. You were on in 2021, I think, when you were in your Insight.
21 or 22, but
like
a
that.
while ago, yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah,
Time
it does
flies.
indeed.
So traditionally, we like people to just give us a little potted history of their career as we kick off. So maybe we could do that, please.
Sure. So I started out a long time ago as a research scientist, I guess, to start with at Procter & Gamble. So I did an internship during my degree and I was actually in a lab making Max Factor's liquid makeup, right? In a lab coat, the specs, the works. And the gods in Cincinnati killed my project and moved me onto a research project on Hugo Boss's skincare products. And it turned out that what I was actually always meant to do was to get under the skin of why people buy what they buy, feel the way they do about their products. And I was just naturally a researcher, being in a lab alone, not really me, but talking to people, very much me. So when I graduated, I went back to P&G and I carried on working in research there. And I did cool stuff, basically. None of the laundry or baby care. I worked on their perfume business and their skincare businesses, and it was so exciting and enriching to kind of understand why people behaved the way they did, how they felt about the products that really made their lives feel happy and positive and joyful. Loved it. P&G is a great training ground. It churns out brilliant researchers. But I hit 7 years and I knew there was more. There was just more out there. So I then left and I went to GHD, the hairstyling brand. So I went from this big corporate hug in the middle of nowhere to Soho in central London to a business that was owned by a PE firm at the time. And it was super turbulent and kind of quite scrappy. And I was their global head of insight for about 4 years. And at that point, I thought I'll always be working for brands. This agency thing, not for me. But I got a call about something that was too good to turn down. So I got this call about this company called Neuro Insight, right? And as a researcher, I think, you're taught to become really good at understanding numbers, so understanding the data, so the quantitative volume of information about people, and also qualitative depth, so really, really rich insight, understanding the thoughts and feelings of people. But Neuro Insight was measuring the subconscious brain response, so you're no longer reliant on the conscious, well thought through, rationalized thinking that people give you in traditional research. But the job was in sales. Never done sales before. Turns out sales is just passionately speaking about the benefit of something that you want other people to use.
Perfect. Yeah.
So I went in as head of BD and marketing and did some marketing work there as well. And I loved it because Neuro Insight was a business that really got into the seat of human decision making. And after a few years doing sales and marketing, my predecessor, who ran the business, Heather Andrews, she said, "You're ready now, and I'm ready to retire. So I'm passing the business on to you." And I became CEO. And like any person in that role, but particularly a woman and a woman of colour, I was like, how the hell am I going to do this? But I did. And I think that's when we met. And, I worked in the business through COVID. It got to a point, I think, where that technology is magical. It's really wonderful, but it's all in lab. So you're sitting and you have to get people to come in, you measure their brain response in real time, and it's not very scalable. And I just felt as though I could stay there for a long time, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to grow it as much as I'd like. And I was really passionate about business growth. So I decided to move on, and I did a couple of roles working in business growth for a couple of more traditional research agencies. So I was a chief growth officer and a chief marketing officer for a bit. And then last year, I decided to start my own growth consulting practice. I loved that. And I'm still doing it. But Mike Follett, wonderful Mike Follett, who I've known for years, we were competing for a while there while I was at Neuro. He said to me, there's an opportunity for us to finally be able to join forces and work together. So we kind of went back and forth and back and forth. And then eventually, he's a great negotiator, is our Mike. So, yeah, here I am at Lumen, and I'm running such a wonderful part of the business. So I've got what's called the Spotlight team at Lumen. So that's effectively their research consultancy business. And what I love is when I was at Neuro, I was involved in some of the conversations around attention, but it never really moved as fast. And Lumen, I always looked to as a business that was moving really quick in this space and innovating in this space. But also just the leadership in Mike is something to behold. He's just a very kind and generous person. So I wanted to work in a business that would be full of awesome people. And simultaneously, I still get to run my growth consulting practice on the side.
Perfect. Nice summary. So I was talking to people, interviewing people at MadFest this year. And I was thinking pretty much everyone at MadFest is in the business of attention, even if they don't call it that, right? Yeah. Because if you're a DSP, you're enabling people to buy attention. We call them ads or display or video, but basically what we're looking for is attention that we can turn into awareness, consideration, intent, and actually, purchases. So how has your perception or understanding of attention changed on that journey from being brand side to being at NeuroInsight and now landing at Lumen? What sort of stayed the same through that sort of period, and what's changed?
Yeah. So what's interesting is the word. So I think humans really latch onto a word, right? And language is our main mode of communication, right? We can communicate through other ways, sort of physically and in body language and stuff, but words are really important. And if I think back, back when I was at P&G, this is 20 years ago, when I started out there, people weren't talking about this, but there were other words that were the word that you use. As I moved to Neuro, I think, and moved from brand side to agency side, when I was at NeuroInsight, we were talking about memorability. So our key metric there was talking about long-term memory encoding, and that there was a clear correlation of that to decision-making and purchase intent. Again, language that is solidly embedded in the psyche of marketers, right? What's fascinating for me is that they're same, right? There's a lot of similarity, and it is just the word. You can start to break it down, and what attention does as a word and how it's evolved is, and particularly at Lumen, we talk a lot about not attention in isolation, but we talk about attention leading to outcomes, because actually that's what matters. I remember 3 years ago, I was at a ThinkBox event, I think it was, and we were talking about what this really means in terms of outcomes, because the media measurement metrics existed. Everyone was buying into them because they were words that everyone was like, right, we're locked into this. It's the metric, and that's that. Sort of like how everyone felt about NPS once upon a time, right? You kind of go, that's the formula. But the outcome is what matters. And I think what we're able to do with attention now is correlate that or relate it to an outcome, which gives it its power and it gives it its actionability.
So I think from my point of view, what I think the reason we didn't really talk about attention in those terms for many years is it was assumed and it couldn't be measured. And so because you couldn't measure it, it was, well, we'll do advertising, we'll put them in the right place. I was talking to someone recently about the evolution of print advertising and how media buyers were desperate for page 3, 5, 7, 9, early right-hand pages, because it was assumed. And, as you open the newspaper, the right-hand page is right in front of you. It was assumed that's, and early in the newspaper is where you're going to be paying the most attention. But we didn't really think about it. But in sort of maybe the last 15 years, maybe slightly shorter time frame than that, we've been able to actually measure that attention, and I think maybe that's where the word has suddenly sprung up from, perhaps, because it's in ADA, right? Like attention, interest, desire, action. It's the first word, and that's 200 years old, 300 years old. So
the other thing is, if we think about in the modern context the way we talk about attention, the first time you probably hear it is as a kid when someone tells you to pay attention. Right. And if you think, I'm sort of waffling on a little bit here and getting a bit philosophical, but if you think a little bit about that as an association, there's so much subjectivity in it. To your point, we're finally getting to a point, but for a long time we weren't at a point where we could quantify and put it in a box. The other complexity with attention, which I definitely saw at Neuro, was around visual versus other sensorial attention. So as I said, our language is a key means of communication, but we have other ways of communicating. In the same way, paying attention to something in advertising, for sure, was predominantly always visual. We always used to talk about, from a neuroscience perspective, how humans are visually dominant creatures. So one thing that we've seen a lot in the past is if you have an advert which has really poor lip sync, what happens is the brain gets really frazzled by it, because
I can't watch them.
Yeah, and the reason for that is...
I can't watch dubbed films as well, because the lips are moving at different... I'm like, no, I can't do it. I'm banned at home from watching them because I get angry.
So what's happening is, because you're visually dominant, your eyes are trying to follow what the mouth is doing, but your ears are hearing something that doesn't match up, and it cannot synchronize that as easily. I mean, obviously it can happen, because we all watch those things at times, but our ability to be attentive towards them is different.
Yeah, 100%. Well, congratulations once again on the new role. It sounds kind of common sense and like an easy job, right? Everyone will want this. They'll be banging your door down for it, but things are really that straightforward. So, a few months in? No, not even.
1 month.
1 month in.
1 month in.
What have you identified as the kind of major opportunities and the things you're most excited about from this new role, and perhaps what your challenges are going to be to help you get there?
So you said something really interesting earlier. You said, was it Mad We've done this before. You say all sorts of interesting things. Madfest, or did you say Cannes? I think you said Madfest.
Madfest,
Everyone who was at Madfest is like talking about attention, right? So I remember when Mike first set up the attention stage at Madfest, I think it was 2021, and he asked me to speak there on behalf of Neuro, right? And what was interesting is that stage was tiny. And then I went this year, and it's enormous. The people in that space absolutely knew what it was. But the challenge / opportunity that we have right now is there's still a truckload of education that needs to be done. So this idea of attention as a metric and as one of the most important metrics, it still hasn't fully embedded. So we have a job to do, and then that leads to another job to do. So the first thing is, how do we create a playbook that helps us to identify exactly what it is in a way that everyone understands, get everyone on the same page, educate them, and then get everyone working with this one metric, right? So we're making a lot of progress on this already, but we have a bit of a way to go. And then the wonderful, lovely problem to have when you get to that is then you start to grow at scale, right? Because everyone, once they understand that, like, I really firmly believe, and I'm picky about who I would work for in this space. Mike and I have known each other for a long time. I was measuring the brain before. Like, that's a big deal. To come to Lumen, I'd have to really, really believe in what they do, and I do. And I think it's very robust. But then in an ideal world, once we've educated everyone, we want them to come and start doing the work with us so they get accurate, robust, really good quality attention, not just a bit of survey data that gives you an attention metric or something like that. So that's the two pieces. It's education, and then it's us when we go through scaling of trying to ensure that we build out the right products and the right models for those clients to be able to use us effectively and quickly. Everyone's in a hurry at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Quick and easy. It needs to be. The more friction you have, the less likely it is to happen.
Cheap. That's the other one. 3 hygiene factors.
Yeah. You can't have them all. Which is it? You want it quickly, or do you want it cheaply?
Yeah, exactly that.
Or do you want it done well? Yeah.
Yes, that too.
Just an interesting thing that has popped into my head there. Did Neuro Insight and Lumen ever work on the same projects together? Did they ever They did? So
not completely together, but we actually, the first time Mike and I met was because of a common client. So I just recorded a podcast, funnily enough, with Rory Sutherland and with a professor of music, of neuroscience music at Goldsmiths, and we were doing a podcast about audio, so not visual attention, but audio. And I then jumped on a train and went to Manchester, where Mike and I were meeting for the first time, but the next day we were presenting for Magnetic Media at the time. So Anna Sampson, who's a phenomenal woman in research, expert and consultant as well, she had hired both Lumen and Neuro Insight to look at, memorability and attention measurement for magazine publications, right? And so we both met because we were doing a similar sort of project. And we had a lot of similarities in terms of the clients that we were looking to work with. We have different RTBs, so the reason to... I'm so P&G, aren't I? The reason to believe. So the tech behind what we were doing was different.
You can take the girl out of P&G.
Right.
Yeah.
But the metrics were different. And the stories were different. And actually, I think one of the beautiful things about what Lumen do is whilst I adore and still tell the stories that I told at Neuro, because they were just neuroscientifically true and not just neuro insight stories, they were complicated. So what I had to do in my work, which you have experienced, is turn those things into analogies, right? And tell stories.
Can I ask you to tell the story of the brand room? Because I loved that when you told it the first time you were on the podcast, and I've been murdering it ever since. Not doing it justice at all. I try and talk about the Cadbury brand room, but I don't do it justice. So maybe we could.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, it applies in this space as well for the work that we do at Lumen, because it's not actually about a metric, it's about the media ecosystem. So the analogy that I've used a lot in the past, and I can't take full credit for it because I think actually Heather Andrew came up with it, and I reworked the story a little bit so that it was in Shazia language. But effectively, what I used to talk about is when you look at the different platforms and channels in the media landscape, now we're in a very cluttered space where everyone's got to spend everywhere to get attention and the right kind of attention. And what we talk about with the analogy of the brand room in the brain is that all those different platforms and channels, they play one of two roles, like broadly speaking. Either you're a furnisher of the room or a light switch. So when I talk about the brand room in the brain, it is that inside your brain, you have... It's a story, but you have a little room that is dedicated to each brand, and it's just, synapses that are coming together. It's not an actual room, just in case any neuroscientists call me up and are like, what are you talking about?
We've not seen these rooms.
Yeah. So the analogy is that you create these networks of association that are like rooms in the brain. And all the interactions that you have with a brand, so Six Cells is orange, so you've got a lovely orange T-shirt on right now, and there's some orange light in here. All those interactions that I would have, they would build associations in the brain. It's like semiotics, right?
So furnishing the room.
So what that does is it furnishes the room. So I always use the Cadbury's one as an example, or IKEA is another great example. But the Cadbury's room in my brain has purple walls, very luxurious, and lots of chocolate and furnishings that are kind of creamy and smooth and all those sorts of things. All of that stuff that I associate with that brand. But humans don't walk around all day thinking about all those brands, right? I mean, I do think about chocolate probably a lot, but not all the time. And so those brand rooms are sitting in darkness, right, until something turns on the light. So the point is that media acts in a multitude of different ways. So you can either have some formats, for example, that help to furnish. So stuff like TV is a great furnisher. Stuff like direct mail is a great furnisher or out of home, because they are providing longer term associations and they're embedding in a different way. But a light switch would be something a bit more short term, like you see an ad on Facebook, right? You scroll past, it's a light switch, it turns the light on in the room, and suddenly, you've got... The challenge comes in terms of media investment.
There's feelings in that room as well, right?
Yes, there are.
Emotions.
All those associations, and our brain builds by association. I love talking about the Disney film Inside Out because it's a beautiful analogy of how all of our memories are embedded alongside an associated emotion. And that's a survival mechanic for human beings, right? For back when we were being chased by mountain lions in the cave. But what's interesting to me when you think about that brand room is if you are disproportionately spending, for example, on social, so you're like, I'm just going to put all my eggs in one basket and just do a shitload. Sorry, excuse my language.
You can say what you like.
A shitload of Facebook advertising. Yeah. What you effectively are doing is maybe turning the light on an empty room. So it's about the mix of stuff. So you want some campaigns and executions that are furnishers and other things that will help to turn on the light.
I love that so much.
I do too.
I've been murdering it more than I thought. Like, I did nowhere near justice. Now I've got it on camera. I'm going to learn that, and I will quote
I'd like you to make sure that you give credit.
Full credit, of course, but I absolutely love that.
I really enjoy talking about it. I do love stories. So
Yeah. We all love stories.
Absolutely.
So one of the good things I think about attention is it helps marketers to understand both media and creative.
Yes.
So the media gets talked about a lot, like the media placement, which media placements get no attention, which gets some attention, is it enough attention, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you're perfectly placed to sort of talk to us about the creative message. Karen Nelson-Field talks about, it always stuck with me, about each media placement having a floor and a ceiling of attention. And the floor might be 0.01 seconds. And just because of where it is, it'll get that even if it's just a white space and there's nothing else there. But it could get 3 seconds of attention if the creative was amazing. And so the difference between 0.01 and 3 seconds is based on the quality of the creative. So how does attention help brands to understand how their creative is performing?
Yeah, so Karen's point is 100% correct. You can, as long as you see something, that's the first step, right? That's what Lumen does. It's like visual attention or gaze is what's important because you have to see it in order for it to have an impact in the first place, or hear it if it's audio, but we're talking visual here. When it comes to understanding that window that Karen talks about, of whether it's seen and nothing happens from it versus whether it's seen and you get enough attention, which is something we measure at Lumen. We go, what's the threshold that will not just get you attention, but drive outcomes? That's where the creative piece comes into play. And I think that at the moment, I think the industry is quite, we're in survival mode a little bit. So there's a real haste. There's like rush, 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 get the metrics, tick the boxes. This is in all matters, whether it be DEI or, all kinds of other things, which I could waffle on about for years. But when it comes to that creative piece, and we talked about stories, what we do know is that the brain will pay attention to and then hold attention with, and therefore holding attention is what causes it to go into memory, and memory is what drives action, only if you've got story in what you're saying. So the creative's ability to tell story is really vital. And this, again, it goes back to from childhood, when our brain is sort of creating a worldview, we are really attracted to stories. So, you and I will meet and you will say, how was your day? And I will tell you a story. Those things will pull you in. And so whether or not your creative is able to tell a story, it is vital to whether or not you don't just get the attention. That's the bare minimum of my eyes went on it. It's whether you will hold the attention and that attention will drive an outcome. So that's the difference. And it's really interesting how that plays out, where you have opportunities to perhaps have longer form versus shorter form content, right? And creative and story, or static versus dynamic. And you can still do that. And I think that that's the piece. You can't have one without the other. You just can't. Karen's right. You could have a blank space. Your eyes will be on it. But so you captured attention. Whether that attention holds and therefore drives an outcome, that's where your creative plays a role.
Yeah. So how do Lumen help to, because there's a billion different things, probably more, different variations that can go into a piece of creative.
Yeah.
So how do you help marketers to understand how effective their creative is and how they can perhaps make it even more effective?
Yeah, I mean, the methodologies that we have are pretty cool. So I love it. I'm a geek. I love a cool method. One of the things that I really enjoy is actually the visualization of the method. So as an example, one of the things we do is obviously it's eye tracking. We're able to create these heat maps. This is if anyone wants to look these up, there are many published examples of this. But when you look at that visualization, it tells you what captures attention and how. So like from that, it's the same as what we did at Neuro. We can tell you where the attention sits and we can tell you why. And we did a really interesting piece of analysis recently on Christmas ads. And this was a really great demonstration of, based on a ton of data around Christmas advertising, we can tell you what works and what doesn't. But from that, we can pull apart which creative elements are driving that. So, the irony for me, and this is a joyful thing really to witness, is a lot of the things that we talked about in Neuroinsight and the things that we talk about at Lumen, there's a lot of similarity in around understanding what it is as creative levers that work well. I think quite a lot of people who are creating these creatives, said the word create a lot, they know these things, but it's always really challenging to be able to quantify that and pull it apart. And so what the methodology does is it'll give you a visual representation of, this is where the attention is going and how it's working. Then also this is the threshold of where that outcomes related stuff happens, right? But then also, I mean, I'm biased, but I have the most incredible team of researchers. They make my job very easy. And what they're able to do is really pick apart what that means, not just here's where the eyes went, but what that actually means in terms of your creative levers and what you can optimize and what you can improve for next time, or what you can learn and predict for the future.
Okay. I remember now, back to the first time that you were on the podcast, we were talking about people. And since that podcast, I've seen one of those heat maps that you talked about. I've seen a few of them, in fact. And there was one that sticks in my mind, and it was I'm sure it was a McDonald's ad, a video ad, a TV ad. And there's a couple sat on a bench with lots of blossom and trees and woods around it, and the logo's in the corner. And you can see that the majority of the attention is on the faces of the people, because people like people, right? And that's what we always say at 6Ls. We say, people pay more attention to people than brands. But it was so fascinating to actually see that proven, because it's kind of a hunch that we've proven a number of times through results, but we've never been able to actually say that, and there's the proof. But so you've got a whole TV space like this, and there's two little faces that are kind of in the middle distance, and that's where people are looking.
Yep. Yeah, our brains are very much drawn to that. So, and also facial expression is a really vital mechanic within that. So,
can I give you an example of why that's so important as well? I saw Ricky Gervais once, and we had a lot of his comedy. He does do a little face like that, or whatever. But we were so far back we couldn't see it, and we didn't enjoy it as much, even though we were in the same room as everyone else, because we couldn't make out his facial features. We felt like we were losing something. A bit like what you were saying earlier about lip syncing being slightly out of kilter. I needed to see the facial features in time with what I was hearing, and when you couldn't, it felt like there was something missing.
Yeah, I mean, Paul Ekman, the founding father of the facial coding methodology, has talked about this, right? Because the reason that all came about was because, there are supposedly a set of facial expressions of emotion. And when we see those, it affects how we respond. So if you see someone who's getting angry, your nervous system will respond in a certain way to that, right? So these are like very much evolutionary mechanics in us. And same goes for TV creative, right? It's not just survival in the forest or something, or in a war zone. Any of those interactions that we witness, the mechanics within us will kick in. And it's relatable, right? When you see a person, it's almost like, I know that the theory of uncanny valley, which you may have heard of, it's a psychological phenomenon where if you see something, I can't remember the exact, there's a curve, because there's always a curve. I can't remember the exact axes of it, but basically if you see something that almost looks real but isn't quite, your brain gets a bit wigged out by it. This is my technical term.
Okay, so like AI pictures that are pretending to be human, but they're not.
Yeah. Yes. So we know how that makes us feel. We can't always say it out loud. Like, we don't know how to express it. But versus when you see a person, your emotional response to that is very different. So Yeah, there's some really interesting, like the heat maps. What the eye tracking methodology does is it doesn't just say. So it's great at telling you if like you've got a banner ad on a web page. It'll tell you if you're getting enough attention on that in a sea of other stuff, right? So that's really helpful at understanding format and placement. But when it comes to creative optimization, which is something that thank you. Creative optimization, which is something that not a lot of methodologies can't do both. They're kind of measuring something single-mindedly, but this methodology allows us to look at the interaction between the two things. Yeah. And then you can go, oh yeah, it works really well over here. But actually, if we take that creative in isolation off of that, just don't look at it as a banner on a page. You take it in isolation, you look at it, we can tell you which bits of the creative are doing the right job.
The AI image, there was that AI influencer, wasn't there, at Wimbledon this year? I mean, not at Wimbledon, but purporting to be at Wimbledon. And she racked up, it was not real, but racked up hundreds of thousands of followers, and people were like sending her marriage proposals and stuff like that. And she was entirely false. And obviously they'd done a good enough job on that people thought it was real. But I'm wondering if your brain responds to something that's not quite real, but is pretending to be real, as if it's trying to be tricked, as if your brain's going, hang on, I'm trying to be tricked here. Because if you looked at Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse isn't real, and you can respond favourably to Mickey Mouse as a character. Yes. Because it's not real, and he's not pretending to be a real mouse, but if it's an AI image of a human and it's trying to make out to be a human, but instinctively that it isn't, maybe that's why your brain's thinking someone's trying to trick me here.
I think so. I mean, I always have to caveat everything by saying I'm not a neuroscientist. It's a passion of mine, so I study extensively. But yes, like from my understanding, it's exactly that. If you see something that's animated, your brain almost would translate it as that's animated and then looks at it to see if it likes the animation or if it's eliciting a certain emotion. But when it's something that's trying to be human, but that doesn't add up, yeah. Mm.
There's a book that I still haven't read, but I'm desperate to read, just haven't had the time, called Honest Signals. And that's about the unconscious, subconscious kind of signals that humans are constantly sending to each other, and that we pick up on without even sort of being able to perceive that we're doing it. But I can't really say much, as I say, because I haven't read it yet. But it sounds like a really interesting book.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So just to finish us off then, Shazia, thank you so much. And that brown room story was even better than last time. You've been practicing, haven't you? I love that. I love that.
I haven't told it for a while.
No, it was super good. I'm going to compare and contrast. I'm going to get you a clip of the first one and send it to you. I'm sure this time was much, much better. But the first one was awesome as well, by the way. That's not to say the first one wasn't awesome. Just to finish off, so if I was a marketer sat here, hadn't started on my attention journey at all, I knew attention was important because I'm not a moron, but I've not done anything about sort of actively measuring it and optimizing towards it. What advice would you give me to get started on thinking about how my media and creative investments can be optimized using attention?
I mean, anyone who asks me that, my biased view is come talk to Lumen.
Yes, that's a given.
But do you know what? I think if I was being completely unbiased, I think one of the things that this is probably quite a broad answer to give. But one of the things I think is we've got to stop taking what we have and thinking it's good enough. So the metrics that are in place, like revisit whether they're giving you what you're looking for. And even around the attention debate, I have seen many in this debate for a while. I mean, I was in it myself for a little while. But what I think has become increasingly important is not what we don't want to do is effectively have another metric. And in 5 years' time, we go, oh, it didn't give us what we were looking for, which ultimately is outcomes. So I think when it comes to marketers, they need to understand really, really what is it that we're trying to measure here. And then you can't just expect to have a metric, tick a box and move on. I think this marriage of the creative effectiveness with the media side is really important. And I know that, Les Binet and Peter Phil talked about the long and the short of it for a chunk of time, and we all discussed that at length. And then it didn't get lost, but it almost stopped being talked about as much because the media landscape just got really, really cluttered. And I know back in, when was it? 2019, and then again in 2021, there was some work done around influencer marketing. A company called Whaler. They were a client of mine at the time, and they did some work around influencer and understanding the science of influencer. And there was this huge push to look at it from that perspective. And I think what happened for a little bit of time was we kept swinging back and forth from, should we talk about creative? And then everyone's like, no, we just need to talk about media. We just need to talk about, there's so many channels, so many platforms, so many formats, and everyone's fighting for it. And actually, I think as a marketer, I'd probably say, think about what it is that you're trying to achieve. It's not just measurement of attention, it's measuring attention and relating that to outcomes. And that's one of the magical things about Lumen, is that, and this is credit to Mike, he's the kind of person who doesn't do something for the sake of doing it. He looks at the bigger picture. It's a great leadership quality, is looking beyond, and understanding attention leading to outcomes is what will give us answers that help us to build a future, right? And then making sure we don't lose our way in kind of thinking you have to think of creative or they're both together. It's like a marriage made in heaven. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Love it. Shazia, thank you very much for coming back on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.